You'll under Communication puts an idea into action, and clear communication helps us to rally people around us to enact change. It allows us to accomplish our goals and to solve problems. Say, for example, you want a cup of coffee. You go to a barista and you ask them for a cup of coffee and they provide you one. That is a way of simple communication, affecting change, and accomplishing goals. However, our problem is that life is complex, and the problems worth solving in life are pretty complicated. It takes a while for us to actually dive into them to find solutions that are effective. So what we need to understand is how to communicate complex ideas in a simple way so that it sticks with our audience and enacts change. Because if we don't, we risk confusing them, and confusion is painful. It's why this emoji exists. How awesome would it be if we could explain what we do to someone, and by the time we're done talking, they are actually grateful and appreciative? Hopefully, that is where we can get to today. So as a case study, we're going to look at Lego. Because for decades, Lego has built an entire empire off of teaching developing minds how to build complex models. Now, because of Lego, a 12-year-old can build something like this. I know! The minute we become an expert in our field, we contract what I call the disease. And the disease is the curse of expertise. The curse of expertise is the inability for us to look at our own field or our own discipline from the outside. So how do we treat the curse of expertise? What's the cure? Well, we need tools and a process that help us get outside of our box, get outside of our bubble, and challenge us to look at it from the outside in. And we do that through empathy. Why is empathy even important? Well, for example, these are a set of instructions built by people that don't care about you. And these are Lego instructions. Step 1, defining your purpose. You know exactly where you're going when you get the Lego set. It's printed right on the box. Lego is making a promise to you. They are telling you very clearly, this is where we are going to take you. When we're thinking about how we want to be able to communicate our idea, we need to figure out, where do we want to end up? Now, if we're talking to somebody new, we don't want them to become complete experts on a first conversation. That's a long conversation. But what we want to be able to do is provide a level of understanding so that way we can have another conversation that builds on top of that. So for us to figure out where we're headed and where we're taking our audience, we need to figure out, where is our purpose? Where are we going? And we do that by asking the question, why? Why am I communicating this? Why does it matter? Why is it important that someone listens to me? And we use these questions to help us build our message and organize our information going forward. Step 2, prioritizing learners over information. So when you're considering what you want to accomplish, naturally you're thinking about who you want to impact, your audience. Now let's look back at Lego again. We do lots of testing to make sure the sets are fun to build and play with and can stay together when they're flying and driving around. Everything Lego does orbits around their end user, their audience, children. So as you're starting to think about your audience, ask yourself these questions. Who is my audience? What does my audience currently know about this subject? What are potential misconceptions they have? What do I want them to know after I present to them? So by understanding where our audience is starting, we know where our point A is. And by knowing where our goal is, we've identified our point Z. But how do we begin to bring our audience from point A to point Z? Step 3, brain dump. So brain dumping is a way of just putting all of the pieces in front of you. So we have to, in a sense, deconstruct what we know and break it down into the individual pieces we're going to equip our audience with that helps them build upon each lesson to bring them to where they need to go. And once we have all of those pieces, then it's time for us to hone in on the best path forward for our audience to take. Step 4, structuring a learning path towards comprehension. This is the step in which we're creating that logical structure. Basically, you're creating your outline at this point. So that's great, but how do we build that path? How do we build that logical path to learning? Well, let's look at Lego. Let's take a look at their instructions. They start with a single piece and then they build out that section, right? And once they've built out that section, they move on to the next section. As I'm building this set, I'm going to build the book first, and then I'm going to create Jack's Beanstalk. And even in building Jack's Beanstalk, I'm just working on one section at a time. The logical framework we need to use here is, in order to understand Y, they must first understand X, or once they understand X, then they can understand Y. So that's what we're going to use to build out our outline. This gives us a broad look at the steps necessary to move from A to Z. And that's great, right? But is that enjoyable? Simply creating an outline, a logical framework, is not everything. It's our delivery process that matters. This leads us to our final step, which is step 5, guiding your audience and capturing their attention. How do we actually achieve our goal, which is effectively communicating and guiding them through an enjoyable learning process? Well, we need to think about the structure of each step, how we're presenting each step, and use a formula that can be found in storytelling, in essays. It can even be found in the Lego instructions we're looking at. And that framework is the problem solution question-answer framework. What we do is we begin each step with a driving question. This question places a gap inside of the mind of our audience, because once they have that question, it creates a hole in their mind that they have to fill. Otherwise, it's just going to drive them bonkers. You provide a question, which creates a gap in their mind, and then you fill that gap. And that's the process that leads us through each step. I mean, if we look at the steps that Lego's doing, they're showing us, these are the pieces we're going to use. That creates a gap in our mind. Where will I place these pieces? You will put these pieces here, here, and here. Awesome! And move to the next step. That is how they create this enjoyable experience that brings children through creating these complex models, because they're only ever focused on a piece at a time, and they're only ever focused on a section at a time, and each section builds upon itself. You have your heading, and you know exactly where you're going to end up, but it is a fascinating journey as you are led through that entire process to finally discover that you built this thing all by yourself. We need to be able to focus on the people that we're talking to. It's our responsibility as the communicator to create an enjoyable learning experience for them. And if we do that, they'll thank us for it.